Roland Gulliver is the new director responsible for ushering in the 41st Toronto International Festival of Authors. It's his first year with the festival after spending 12 years with the Edinburgh International Book Festival, which I consider a bit of a sister festival to the Toronto International Festival of Authors. So you, as director, come on board for the first year. You are in the country for all of 3 weeks before the country gets in lockdown, goes into pandemic. You head back to Scotland to work from home. It is a crazy introduction to the festival. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it wasn't the year I planned to have, and it wasn't the beginning I hoped to have when I came to Toronto. It was, yeah, because where to start with that question, actually? Yeah, because it's interesting, because so much of my focus was around coming to the city, settling in, spending the summer, working towards that first festival and working towards the kind of all the things that I'd imagined and hoped and dreamed about making a live festival, and, you know, occupying the Harbourfront Centre and the lake and all those elements, and how to bring in authors. And even the thing, having worked in Edinburgh for 12 years, and one of the hardest things about that was trying to get American authors to come to the festival, because it's logistically and financially a challenge. So I was like, oh, I'll go to Toronto, American author, all those brilliant American authors I love, just on my doorstep. They'll just be able to hop over the border. Oh, brilliant, big dream come true. But but obviously that hadn't happened, and so yeah. But at the same time, we've still, all the kind of ideas that I came with, all the ideas that I wanted to bring to the live festival, we have taken and translated into the digital platform. And actually we have been able to do some more. So, one of the things I was really interested about was, how does a literary festival engage with digital content and podcasts? And, I think particularly podcasts are such a huge medium now in the past couple of years as a form of storytelling, and how do we as a literary festival respond to that, and novels and digital storytelling. So we have, that has obviously come to the fore over the last 6 months.
Like, it's been a crazy sort of trajectory for yourself, but at what point after that, you're back in Scotland? What's the timeline look like for pivoting the festival to completely online? Because there must have been a time where it's like, oh, we're going to be out of the woods and it's going to happen in person, or was that almost immediate as well?
There was obviously the process of, we had a program of, we worked with Forest of Reading and Word on the Street and we had a program of events that we were going to be presenting over the spring. Obviously Toronto Lit Up is a big part of what we do. So there was a process of having to kind of decide how we would cancel those events or rearrange those events. And then, there was a period where we were like, so what are we going to be? What's going to happen? Are we going to be digital? Will we be live? Will we be something in between? And, it was quite a hard period in terms of those levels of anxiety and just kind of not knowing what was going to happen. But then, I guess from my perspective, around about early June, it was that, rather than thinking about, okay, how do we go from festivals of hundreds of people and how do we reduce it down, of kind of essentially flipping or pivoting, as is our word of the year, and looking at it the other way, in a sense of, particularly for literature, you are starting from a very simple perspective of somebody telling a story and somebody listening, or somebody having a book and giving it to a reader, and that's something that's I've always found very at the root of any literary festival in normal times, but because of where we are now, that kind of looking at it differently in that terms of the relationship of how you then build a festival. So we then essentially decided, okay, we will make a digital festival, and we will use the time in particular to look, so as well as producing a live festival online, look at how we can respond to the medium of being in this digital space, and what new things can we do. So from the podcast to the interactive map to events in different languages and things like that. And so using it to be a bit more adventurous. And obviously we thought, okay, we'll get, I was reminded of it, I think last week, we were like, okay, so if we have a digital festival in October, will we be competing with venues opening and events with audiences? Will we have to compete with a live event again? And we also kind of thought, well, we might be able to create a program where we can bring in an audience at some stage. So rather than doing that, having a live festival and flipping to digital, maybe we can have a digital festival and flip to live and go that way instead.
That's crazy. So there's a lot of contingencies that you're planning even before then. It seems almost crazy to think it was going to go live, but you sort of touched on it. The biggest challenge with virtual events has always been engagement. I mean, there's a lot of online video fatigue out there. So how are you looking to engage with an audience, keep participants for the duration of a session, and create a sense of virtual intimacy for authors and an audience now that it's all virtual?
Well, I think that was a big kind of challenge. So in terms of making the program, I think having a diversity of experiences was really important to me, which is the same for the live event. So imagining the audience member coming to the festival online on their screen and being able to kind of choose from a range of different events or different experiences. So for me, it was important that the festival was still quite big. I know a lot of festivals by necessity had to reduce their size, but so there's a diversity of experience in terms of conversations and readings, new commissions, performances, debates, and then also obviously the digital content, and then kind of, I guess, as well as watching what everybody else was doing. So we partnered with the Art Gallery of Ontario to do some little kind of interviews with authors and artists, and I did one with Ian Rankin and with Catherine Hernandez, talking about their lockdown experience as a writer and an artist, and they were really useful in kind of working out what worked in a sense. So I think some digital events that had lots of panel members, from my perspective, didn't work because it was kind of messy, and some events were too long. So I think having the author events where there's one or two people, all our author events are about 45 minutes this year, so they're quite focused. And I think so I think that was kind of looking at how we engage in that, and again looking at that relationship between being a digital festival online, which means you are part of this very broad, competitive, kind of global event field, but also, so in that respect, making the program feel Canadian and Torontonian, but also the fact that the audience will still be a local audience, I think.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because that is the challenge to identify. It's the Toronto International Festival of Authors. How do you make what is in an online space feel uniquely Canadian or regional as uniquely Toronto? And is that even necessary in the virtual world, or is that like definitely sort of a stamp of acclaim for the TIFA?
Well, for me, it was important. It was important anyway. And again, coming to the festival, it was important because it's obviously historically it was known as the International Festival of Authors, and the Toronto had come a couple of years ago, and I think that giving it that identity and that character was really important. And I think, and again, within this space, showing that character as part of the program and that identity was really important to make it stand out. So on the one hand, to make it stand out in terms of the kind of global marketplace, but then also to make it connect to our audience. And for me, obviously coming from Edinburgh, from Scotland, where the population of Scotland is around 5 million, which is significantly less than live in this city. So for me, connecting better with the city and responding to the city and the neighborhoods and the diversity and the languages and all that kind of creative story potential was really important, both for live and for digital.
And you also talk about some of the conversations you have, some of the innovations. And again, like the festival, I feel like is always innovating year over year. But this year I noticed you have like masterclass, skin hunger, critical conversations. Can you talk a little bit about those and the thinking behind that in a virtual space? Again,
the offering of different experiences. I apologize for my washing machine in the background, I realize. Pre-festival prep. So I think, again, the Skin Hunger Commissions was really exciting. There were lots of reasons for doing that, in a sense of the festival engaging with writers in a different way, so that both because of the time we're in where authors are, to help support and engage authors and engage them in a different way, rather than just presenting their book, but actually paying them to create some work and asking them to create something that responds to the period that we're in. So that phrase "skin hunger" came from the Dutch, and it was a phrase that came to represent how we were all feeling. And for me, it was like a beautiful phrase to give writers to respond to in that sense. And again, it enabled us to, and obviously for me, being able to engage with as many different writers in new ways as being the new director was really important. And obviously it's a bit harder being remote and we're all at home, so you don't just bump into people at events and things like that. And again, and I think just lots the elements of the masterclasses was looking at how we enable people to write their own stories. Again, working with Humber College, an amazing array of writers who are involved in that project. These are things that I've done in Edinburgh. We did a masterclass program, which was enormously popular because it enables people to connect with writers that they might not always connect with, and to learn storytelling skills.
What about the critical conversations?
Yes.
That's a little new as well.
For me, it was key that the festival broadened out the range of genres that it represented, the range of topics, and also kind of responded to the contemporary issues. And I think both in the live format and in the digital format, we as audience members, as readers, we look to books and authors for some understanding and some enlightenment and some kind of that offering of understanding of key issues. And I think particularly, for me as a person, not just a festival director, but if you're looking at things like the US election, for example, or the opioid crisis, which is something that coming to Canada is a real issue. And how do we offer audiences the ability to get some real insight and understanding of these key issues that are affecting everyone's daily lives, and you're maybe feeling a bit disempowered or unknowledgeable, and you just want the opportunity to, I think literary events offer that space where you can come into a room or the digital event and engage and hear people talk eloquently and with expertise, and also you can ask a question. Like, that this issue, how does it, what does this mean? I think so being able to do those debates around those topics is really important to kind of, again, and also to bring together different perspectives. So, the idea of they're not debates, they're conversations, so that there are perspectives and angles so that you get more of an understanding of an issue.
It's also showing like a diversity because it's gone to virtual. You guys are doing stuff on Instagram Live. There's a couple that are done on Zoom, as well as the platform itself. I mean, how has it forced you to like engage with social media, and how has that changed with this year as perhaps in other years? The emphasis on communication now is through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And like those kind of channels. And I guess for us, it's really important to give it a feeling of personality and character and voice, so that people feel as though they are being engaged with in a way that is friendly and human. The brilliant thing is that we've been able, because of streaming the events through our website, we have been able to redesign and rebuild the website and rebrand the website, so that's kind of, it's something when I arrived that we aspired to do, but we're maybe like, well, that's maybe a 2021 project. But because of the necessity, we've been able to redesign the website. Well, and it looks fantastic, but that also leads me to wonder, were you able to leverage in-house talent for this, or did you have to bring some outside resources to bring this online?
One of the great advantages of the festival is that we're part of the Harbourfront Centre. And that, that from my perspective has been literally a lifesaver in terms of I wouldn't have been I wouldn't have been able to arrive as the director of a new organization in Canada and dealt with the pandemic in terms of health and safety and closing and CERB and all those elements of infrastructure and health and safety and HR that we have that support from the Harbourfront Centre. And then in turn, there was a venue space. So they have been, the production team within the Harbourfront Centre have been hugely important in terms of developing the events and online. And then we've been working with Harbourfront because they've developed their own digital production team to help deliver some of the events. So, that kind of, again, I think I often think about it that maybe a couple of years ago when you were in an arts organization, they said, we need to do something really simple and really quick and really cheap. Let's do something, we'll just do something online, let's do something digital. It'll be really easy. Whereas I think we've all learned to do it well, as you were saying beforehand, and to do it well so it has really good production values and the kind of strong infrastructure, and then kind of the quality is you need that physical presence in terms of manpower and time and tech.
Right. Well, and did you defer to the Harbourfront Centre? Like, do you know what platform you settled on? Was it Crowdcast? Was it a particular platform? Was it because of what other arts organizations have been using successfully? Like, what informed the technology behind this?
Essentially, a lot of different elements, really. So we did quite a lot of research into the different formats of what would work for what we wanted to do. So again, looking at how can we translate the elements of a live literary event onto digital? So how can we, how can we do something that will work and not collapse on us in terms of infrastructure? How can we do something that will enable us to present events kind of not simultaneously, but that will overrun in terms of timing? So we've kind of got three main channels on the website for doing events. How can people ask questions? How can we, how in terms of camera work, how will things work? So we looked at, what would it be, Facebook Live? Would it be just using YouTube? So I think from our perspective, using Vimeo was the most kind of rewarding in terms of empowering us to do what we wanted to do.
With that, can you talk a little about the changes in cost running the event? Obviously, you're not getting all these authors coming in, putting them up, paying for their travel, and you've moved to making all the events available for free. But it feels like it's a bit of a seesaw, a give and take. Can you talk a little bit the financial aspects?
One of the great challenges that all the arts organizations and festivals face is that we kind of all been designed to expect our digital content to be free, and if it's not free, we'll either walk away very quickly or find another way to get it for free. So we've offered our events for free. One of the things that has been brilliant is the way that the arts the funders like the Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council have all responded and adapted and supported and enabled festivals and arts organizations to kind of keep going and to support them to adapt and to survive, and that's been brilliant. But yeah, so we don't have a travel budget, we don't have a virtually non-existent hotel budget, but yeah, now those costs are through the design of the website, through the production costs. We will be having a few events down at the Harbourfront Centre, so there is those venue spaces. We've been doing pre-recording events. More has gone in towards the commissioning of, so the Skin Hunger commissions, the podcast commissions, the creating of work in that sense. And I think there's an interesting challenge for the future in the sense of how do you get people to pay for digital content? And obviously we're hoping people will be kind enough to donate and support the festival, and also importantly buy a book to support the authors. But also it's a challenge because the experience you're offering the author is very different. So, part of the invitation was the experience of coming to Toronto, coming to the Harbourfront meeting your authors, meeting the audience, having a nice glass of wine, all those things that were more than just the fee. Whereas now you are, that sense of engagement is lost a little bit. And I guess that's the hardest thing in terms of, for me as a festival director, how the greatest moments are when you're standing talking to your favorite author or met these people that you've had all these conversations with over the months. And we will still do that in a digital green room, but not quite as the...
And that's the frustrating thing. Like, I wonder how authors are faring in this environment. Their exposure, much like the festival, is now global and worldwide. The uptick as far as registrants is probably through the roof, but then book sales are probably going to suffer as a result. But again, it's another sort of give and take. And I'm wondering how the authors have been throughout this process.
I think it's been hard. I think, again, there is that kind of the ability to not to have to travel and to be able to participate in lots of different events, but maybe not feeling as though you feel engaged in an event as deeply as you maybe want to be. The relationship between doing a live event and getting the book sales is currently not there. But I think overall in this time, lots of people are still buying books and turn to books in terms of how they seek solace and understanding. And I think one of the challenges now for literary festivals is that perhaps historically we've been maybe reactive in terms of responding to what authors, what publishers are presenting to us. Whereas I think both in relation to the period of the pandemic, but also the past few months of protest and kind of the issues that have come up from that, I think going forward, literary festivals probably need to be a bit more proactive in terms of, for example, how they, as well as presenting live authors, how do they develop and build engagement or writers of the future or commission work around topics that we should be talking about. And if we are, you have that brilliant that international writers can be part of your festival, but they'll be on a screen. But then are you then inviting someone who's here for a couple of months so that they quarantine and they do a residency, and then, so that there'll be some interesting new ways of thinking, I think, that will come out of this.
Honestly, like, as you're planning for next year, which sounds crazy to say, but like it's a long road to putting something like this on. I mean, even if it's in the spring again, who knows where we're going to be? And again, it may be this hybrid sort of thing. It could be virtual again. And maybe it's unfair to ask at this point because you haven't gone through the process, but are there things you feel like you will be carrying forward in subsequent years, even if we get to sort of a pre-COVID reality with in-person events?
I think there's an interesting element to explore between the live events and the digital events. And I think now that we've been part of this world, we will probably now be more comfortable to have an event on stage where there are a selection of panelists and someone's on a screen. Whereas I think before that, we were, as audiences or organizers, we might be like, well, that's not very satisfactory. We need the person on stage. So that, and obviously the environmental issues around that then come to the fore. And then I think there's a conversation about, some of the beautiful, we pre-recorded some events with Anne Michaels and Ivan Coyote on stage down the harbourfront. And they were just beautiful in terms of the content and being live. And that was just magical to see that again. And so how do you, there is maybe elements of how do you take performances and present them live. And then from my perspective, the podcasts that we've commissioned, like Right in the Neighbourhood and Any Night of the Week, and the installations, and we have a digital installation down at Union Station. I think the possibilities now of working with the digital medium have kind of hopefully opened up a kind of new creative space that we all kind of dabbled in a little bit and were like interested in, but never really focused on. And so I think, there is a kind of space to explore.
Absolutely. And that sort of speaks to, and self-serving, of course, but I've noticed the Delegate Program is a lot smaller this year. And I'm wondering, what was the decision behind that? Is that something that's going to continue on? Like, how is that program, which has been around for quite some time, looking to change this year and in subsequent years?
it was interesting to look at it this year in terms of how do you get that. So again, there's almost, we seem to be kind of finding two sides to every issue. There's the fact that we are part of using social media and Twitter and Instagram, that actually the Delegate Program has a greater influence in terms of the impact and reach to audiences that maybe wasn't quite there for the immediate in person, to get people to come to events. So that was that's really interesting. But then how as a delegate, how do you feel as though you're part of the festival in a sense? And it'll be interesting to kind of revisit afterwards, see how you felt you attended the festival.
I am going to miss terribly talking with the authors afterwards. And how are we even doing book signings? Is that even a thing anymore in the virtual space?
Some festivals have tried it. It is tricky. There was obviously book plates and things like that. But yeah, that is the one bit of the kind of literary event experience that is the hardest to replicate in that sense. But we have our kind of complementary to the Delegate Program. We have our International Visitors Program, where we used to bring delegates from publishing across the world into Toronto for a program to kind of promote and engage with the industry. And that again will be digital this year, but we've looked at it so that the delegates that came this year digitally would then come, hopefully everything works, physically next year. And actually that's a really interesting idea, because it then changes that relationship of working with the International Visitors Program, and how you're then having a longer relationship with them, and actually the results might be more productive in that sense.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know you've probably got a ton of things that you're having to contend with before the event itself, which is like a day away, which is crazy. So yeah. Before we finish off, just give me your solid pitch for this year's Toronto International Festival of Authors, and considering the absolute glut of online experiences and book festivals and readings and the rest of it, why this is an absolutely must-attend event.
The richness and variety and quality and quantity of authors, from the headline names to debut authors, poetry. We've got 4 poetry slams, 2 in partnership with the Toronto Poetry Slam, 2 connecting in with FLUP down in Rio. I think it's just it's very hard to encapsulate that, isn't it? How my Britishness comes to the fore when I don't. But I think it's the wealth of experiences that are in the program, and there are, depending on what you think, the podcasts, the maps, the debates, the performances, the masterclasses. I think for me, the wealth and diversity of what's in that program makes it different from other literary festivals out there.
Well, thank you very much, Roland. I appreciate you taking some time out this week to do this.
Thank you very much. It's great.